Hello again. I'm Mike Burnett. Welcome to the Real Squabble. Today we're talking about the economics of happiness. Before we do, let me remind you to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Real Squabble. Good morning, guys. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night from all around the world. And Sue is going to kick it off for us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Henderson, and these days I'm a travel writer and a gad about getting around the world. And a couple of interesting things happened to me in late 19, obviously before the lockdown. I was headed to Nepal. I've been involved in some things there, and adjacent, right next door, is the country of Bhutan. And I got an invitation to go to Bhutan, and I started researching it. And one of the things it is most well known for is they gauge their success on happiness. Mm-hmm. They don't gauge it on economy. They gauge it on happiness. And I really started digging into that. It turns out there's lots of research on that, including Michael J. Fox has been over there doing video as part of his, entire pursuit of trying to determine what can make him happy in his illness. But in the context, had a conversation with our tour guide and our driver. How do you measure happiness? What do you do? Well, the government measures our happiness based on 5 or 6 different things. Are we secure? Are we safe? Do we have enough food? Do we have enough education for our children? And they survey them, and they survey them like every 5 years, kind of the way we do a census. They literally survey the population. And I said, so what if you tell them that you're not happy about something? Or you're not happy with your salary? Well, they fix it.
They line you up and shoot you.
No, they just, if enough tour guides tell the government that they don't think their salary is sufficient to be happy, it's not about unionizing. It's a very docile, very calm kind of environment, but the government fixes it. Now, I'm not suggesting that kind. It's a absolute monarchy. The king is everything. He can do anything he wants to there. It's not necessarily that democratic.
Right.
But what got me thinking about it is, how do we measure success? Sure. And I was trying to relate to him. I was saying to him, in the West, if anybody from the government came and asked us if we're happy with our salary, we would tell them to get out. Like, why are you asking me that question? It's none of your business. Like, it's just not how we are programmed to be. At the same time, I work a lot of nonprofit programs and projects with folks, and I'm always asking for funding from economic development folks and that kind of thing. And I find that they define success in your local community. If you talk to your economic development director, you will find out that the definition of success is more business, more people, more tax revenue, more. As long as we're doing more. And I will say, well, what happens if I'm good friends now with the number of them. What happens if we don't chase that particular development you're talking about right now? Well, we might lose our AAA bond rating. Okay. And what happens when we lose our AAA bond rating? Well, then we can't generate more.
Right.
So, okay. My question to the team is, how do we measure success? Do we measure it based on economy? Why does the news lead with economic stats? Right? Why is it, the Dow Jones did, or Wall Street, blah, blah, blah? What does that have to do with your happiness?
Well, I think we like to check it like we do the weather to some extent, right? Each day we know we have investments and we want to see how well it's doing. I found it fascinating reading the articles you sent us on Bhutan and them not measuring it against what they call the GNP or the GDP, but the GHP, gross national happiness. And even with those guys and them being a monarchy, like you said, they don't measure it strictly on economic factors.
Right.
So there's a whole big bunch of complex things that roll into it. And I think, the last thing I want is some business major telling me whether, I'm happy or not.
Well, I think the last thing I want anybody telling me is whether I'm happy or not, or what have you. I mean, that's a very personal and subjective thing. I'm sorry, Glenn. I think I might have interrupted you. I didn't mean to.
That's okay. You've never done that.
Stop it.
I just finished reading a book, actually listening to a book, because that's what I do mostly. Understory. I forget who wrote it, but the book kind of looks at people who are who like trees, right? So, and it's different kinds of people who like trees. And I'm not doing justice to the book by really getting into it, but the economics of wanting more causes us globally to take forests out of the world, and the complexity of a forest is, I mean, I know that Mike and I were in Germany stationed for a while, and if you walk into German forests, you see that they've been like raked, and there's no, it's like a very, very hospital looking forest. In the forests that I was there, I know we're going to get people saying, "Oh no, you've not been to the touring of Waldis, touring of
a leaf that has fallen."
There's a leaf that fell, so the forestmeister goes and picks it up real quick, or he rakes it. That's how they looked, right. And that looked always peculiar to me, because I grew up in Western Montana, where you can actually, I think you can still step places where no man's ever been. At least it looks like no man's ever been there for a while. Right. And the complexity of rotting logs, fallen trees, the mosses and the fungi, and all of the amazing biodiversity that actually causes a forest to be a forest is kind of what this book talked about. Way deeper than I ever thought about it. But the fact that we're losing so much of that, and then the people who are cutting down trees, the companies that own that range, they say, well, we're going in and planting them again, but it because they're removing all of the understory, they're not getting the same kind of forest, and so we're not actually left with the same kind of things, and then that ends up with a lot of landslides, because the forest, there's just all those different things that are interconnected with wanting to have more and consuming. And I'm a really good consumer. I like to get more and buy more and have more. And it's funny, because my wife and I were talking about, what if we try to do minimalist? I'm like, that's a good idea. How I could go with minimalism. And then almost like 10 minutes later, I'm talking about buying an extra car so that I can have a commuter car.
Well, I think we've been well trained. I guess that's part of what I'm saying, at least in this culture, in the American culture, we have been well trained to be consumers. There's no question. I mean, there's all sorts of studies on that. Everything from how they attract your attention from the time you're a little kid on commercials back in the 70s, all the way to, Ronald McDonald didn't just exist because they wanted entertainment. It was to get kids whining about, take me to McDonald's, mommy. Yeah. So, I mean, we're well trained across the board, and we've done extremely well at exporting that in a lot of places. Not that I'm very happy with that most of the time, but in general, we've trained ourselves to be those consumers, but we have not been trained to consider the impact. Yeah. Like we're talking about, on the forests or on the environment, or not even on the environment. How about on the people who make that inexpensive item from Walmart?
Hey, first, Glenn, the Germans inventory all their leaves, and there is a gross leaf happiness
they might
measurement that they have there.
I'm sure that's right.
Secondly, and I think this touches on what you're talking about, and I had read in the study for the show of this concept called the Hedonic Treadmill, right? It's based on the word hedonism, hedonic treadmill, right? So that we get something, and it's relative to what we want, what other people have, or what we grow tired of. for instance, how great did you feel? How happy were you when you first got your iPhone 3? Right? Or even maybe your iPhone, whatever the next couple levels were. All right. Now, I mean, quite honestly, you may not be happy getting an iPhone 3. I don't even know if they connect anymore. Right? You're with that consumerism that you're talking about, Sue. People are being made to feel like they don't have the latest and greatest if they have an iPhone 12 because there's an iPhone 13. Right.
And right. And how does that impact your level of happiness?
Yeah.
Constantly comparing, we've kind of set ourselves up for that as well.
A few years ago, I'll give you some insight to me right now on my weight loss or lack thereof. But a few years ago, if I had have gone up to 220 pounds, I would have felt very unhappy about myself and my self-image and that type of thing. But in the last 6 months, I've lost 45 pounds and gone down to 220. So I feel really happy about it. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of perspective there with that, and perhaps even where you live or who you're hanging out with. Because if all your friends, if say you make a basic average income and you live in a neighborhood where everyone is very well-to-do, owns 2 condos, they're millionaires, but you're comfortable, you have all the food and the things that you need, you might start feeling bad about yourself. Or you might be a millionaire and live in a multi-billionaire neighborhood where you would feel happier if you lived in an average neighborhood and not under so much social pressure if you were hanging out with the super rich of the world.
Well, I think it goes a lot deeper in a lot of ways. When my husband retired and I was downsized and we were no longer fully employed and we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do, we made some conscious choices. Maybe 25 years ago, we made some conscious choices to not chase money, to find a place where we could live and work and not have to, for instance, drive for an hour and a half on the highway. Yeah. And we both turned down jobs over the last 25 years that would have had us do that commute. But we weighed the value of time together and sanity and not being on the road against how much income. And I don't think that had anything to do with depriving us of things, right? It gave us, we prioritize quality of life. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we're teaching our kids that in many, many ways, not just the commercialism that they see in all their media, but also what we're saying to them about, you need to go to college so you can get a better job so you can afford blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Or what, like we're just programming them with the same thing. And when we've all traveled significantly, when you travel to places that don't have all that, you have to stop a second and say, so what are your experiences in other cultures or other places where you kind of have gone, I guess I didn't miss all that.
In other cultures.
Well, for instance, even coming back to the U.S., we spent 10 years living in Western Europe, which is not deprived. But coming back to the U.S., I got lost in a grocery store for 3 hours because I was like, what? Why are there 14 kinds of ketchup? I'm so confused. I don't even know what on every aisle.
Well, I was overseas when they had the old gas pumps, right? With the lever that you had to flip up. And I came home on leave one time and I had to, and I was in uniform and there was a lady at the pump there. I was trying to figure out this new digital thing with putting your credit card in, and I didn't know what to do. And, I admitted it. I looked over and I said, ma'am, you're going to find this funny, but I just came from overseas and I have no idea how to turn this thing on.
I mean, right? The cultural shock stuff, yes. But what I'm saying is I lived just fine without the choice of 18 ketchups.
Oh, exactly. Okay. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I completely relate to what Sue is saying because whenever I go back the grocery store is going to be at least a 2 to 3 hour foray into the wilderness for me because of the same reason. Well, geez, how many types of bread do I need? How many, brands of ketchup, like you said?
Yeah.
And it's just what I found interesting in some of the things that Sue sent us was a professor, Andrew Oswald from the University of Warwick, wrote something I very strongly disagree with. So I was just wondering if anybody else picked up on it or how they felt about it. But what he said was there is a very strong link between money and happiness. I don't agree with that.
There's a lot of people who don't agree with it. As a matter of fact, some of the things I read said quite the opposite. But there's this thing called the Easterland Paradox. He's a professor who brought it up. Maybe you saw that, where they were saying that even if the income levels of a country go up, the average level of happiness doesn't always follow. Right? Sometimes some people are arguing, well, it doesn't necessarily follow with wealthy nations, but it does follow more with poorer countries.
Right.
And again, you're talking about Maslow's hierarchy there. You're looking at people. I mean, can you say sure, eating regularly makes me happy, but I don't think of it like that. I think of it as something that not that I want to make me happy, but that I need to live another day. So, it does make me happy to be able to do it. There's lots of people in this world that go hungry. And I think that's another issue for another show.
Yeah.
But there's this cross section, I think, that you brought up earlier, Jackie, that's relative to all these things that even Bhutan brings up as I was reading more deeply into their country, where they consider primarily 4 issues that you can go down deeper into. They look at social, physical, spiritual, and environmental health of their citizens. And I would agree. We would all, have different takes on those categories, but I would say, yes, those are important categories that aren't mutually exclusive.
Well, why do you think that we stress so much in this culture? All of the stats, you don't ever see any of those things really on the news, right? And any of those values, you see it periodically and sometimes even scornfully mentioned when you talk about the spiritual community in general. But it's not a depth of spirit. Like, I don't know, people kind of make fun of yoga enthusiasts for, digging deep into their spiritual health and their spiritual happiness. I just feel like it's not taken seriously in many, many circles. And maybe it's starting to be because of the environmental issues, as you were talking about earlier, Glenn. But...
Well, I think there's a shift going on again, where, like what you were just referring to, Sue, with the spiritual community, we'll put it that way. That's a resurgence coming back up again, and people are getting more and more curious and are looking more and more into it. But you're right. Usually, not always, but usually, I would say, when it is mentioned in general conversation, it's a scorned thing. It really is. No. So when did you get your iPhone 12? How does that work? Have you figured out the conversation immediately shifts to something completely unrelated, really, to our quality of life and our quality of happiness.
Right.
Yeah,
it's almost as if it makes you, it's almost as if talking about it makes people uncomfortable.
Well, I may not have something that might leave me behind. So it's back to that psychological thing that drives a lot of things in life called fear.
Go ahead, Glenn.
So what I was going to jump on with what Jackie was saying is, when you look at there's a particular segment of the population that is really opposed to anything religious or spiritual, and that, in my experience, that particular segment of the population has to fill that void that does exist in your heart of needing a spiritual guide with something. And in my experience, chatting with these people, it's usually been an unbelievable reliance on government and the things that government can provide for you. And I've never been reliant on government for anything. Oddly, we all know each other through active service in the military or working in the military. So that's something that the government actually does provide is protection. But and then there's the other side of the coin. There's that segment of the population that is completely and perhaps overweighted in the areas of their life that they need to, balance out in the spiritual realm. And it's not just Christians. I live in Seattle. We have a whole bunch of Wiccans here and a myriad of everything in between. And they'll get, super obsessed with that and not be not care about the environmental health that they have, or not care about their physical health. Yeah. And I see that in I'm not balanced in those four things that Mike brought up. I know that, Mike and I have the same goal of being around 220. It's been a while for me.
Well, I do think that finding balance, I prefer to look at things often when you start talking globally and societally. I prefer to say, what's it like in your home, right? How does your kitchen conversation balance these things? I still do, actually. I don't do it so much because it's just the two of us. But anytime there are people at our table, I require everybody to just say something during dinner that made them smile today. Because we spend so much time talking about what made us unhappy, how someone ticked us off, cut us off in driving, or annoyed me at work, or blah, blah, blah. I just am looking for balance, right? Yes. And so you hear a lot about this in gratitude journals and things like that. If you just once a day have to say something good happened to me today, or, and that's why I'm like, what is wrong with the news? It's not that I don't want to see what's happening in the world, shootings and politics and all this stuff, but why do we spend so much energy on the negative and not on the positive, which provides balance?
I agree with you 100%. And I think that gratitude is something that we should intentionally practice. When we wake up, when we go to bed, everyone has something to complain about. We can be sucked into that cesspool of problems and things that we could write books about in our life.
People have,
of issues going on. And I think that waking up each day and having that gratitude, having that thankfulness for your friends, your family, your God, whatever it is that you find important that has meaning and purpose to you. And we do around our table. You said around the table, right? So all of those things, that I brought up that they talk about in Bhutan, the social, you guys know me. I'm an extremely social person. And when I'm out and about, you do not have to believe what I believe in order for me to strike up a conversation with you at the store or in the elevator or while I'm walking my dog. I'm friendly. I have, I talk to everybody, right? I love being social. I'm an extrovert in that way. Maybe that's why I got into radio in the first place. I'm social with my friends and family. I like a variety of subjects. Physical, I've got my 3-mile run down to 28 minutes now. So my mile run down to like 9-10. I'm exercising. Actually, my daughter has an app in Kickstart. She's a life coach now. So I've signed up for that, and she's do you
think by physical they meant your physical fitness, or do you think by physical they meant your physical environment?
Yeah, both. Both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
point.
I think both. I think your physical environment is important too. Say if you came back from Afghanistan and you don't have legs, your physical environment is going to matter a lot.
No,
Or,
say if you're in a tent in Afghanistan with no, climate control and a lot of sand, it's going to be different from being in your, living room.
true, but I was happy to have a cot and not being shot at for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's all relative as well. But the physical things are important. How you physically feel is important because it helps you cope with it.
Yeah.
Right. I think the spiritual aspect is the greatest criterion for me because it helps me to psychologically cope with some of the harder things of life. The problems, death, physical loss of my physical strength as I get older. And I can see, and I've seen my son had 3 friends in high school who committed suicide because they really got on this existential roller coaster where they were super smart kids who really delved more into reading Sartre and Nietzsche, which I do too, but they just bought into it that there was no meaning, there was no purpose, there was no spirituality. They were just a physical being and they were tired of it. And they ended their life. And there was no conversation with them. And I bring that up because we're talking to a lot of people potentially here who say, you need to think about it. Talk to a friend, talk to family, talk to a chaplain, talk to someone you trust, right? Whomever that is, whatever you believe. And keep seeking. And I think that's what we all do. It's like, all right, I don't have all the answers. I don't think that, I'm perfect, but I know that each of us here in our own way is seeking answers. We're on a journey to try to discover what is true.
I think it's interesting, Mike, that when we look at those 4 areas that were measured, that you brought up earlier, how a lot of times they blend together, and the physical and the environmental. I was just thinking about that book Understory again, and some of the researchers were actually realizing that the trees and the forest give off pheromones, and that being in nature, and we already know this, that it kind of calms you down, and even just taking a walk in the woods calms you down, and that it might actually be a combination of just it's a relaxing place, but it also that there may actually be some pheromones or something that are given off by the woods to actually make you feel better.
Yeah.
So that begs the question of do the trees really feel our pain? Are they doing this to help us? I don't know, but it's a really interesting. If you keep your mind open, I've never been much of a hardcore anything, right? But to just keep your mind open and go, golly, that's kind of, there's some potential there, right? For just thought.
Yeah, I would question your prudence. If you don't care about the environment, I would question your prudence.
Yeah, go ahead, Jackie. Yeah, you're right, Mike.
Yes. No, I was just gonna kind of trail onto what Glenn was saying there. I came across a saying, and I know you've all heard it or seen it. It came out a few years ago, but it was, often to the forest I go to lose my mind and find my soul. And, I always loved that because for me, the forest is my place. That is my calming place. That is my inspiration.
And some people it's the beach. It's
right. And some it's the beach or the mountains or just a forest glade. Exactly. Yeah. So when we talk about the economics of happiness, ever since we brought this up, I keep thinking, but when you come right down to it, can you get happiness economically through the economics of where you live or how you live? I mean, that there's that whole thing about how it's easier. It's just as easy to marry a rich man as a poor man, but but does that have anything to do with happiness? Does it really have anything to do with it?
No.
Well, I would say, look at your experience during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I think it changed a lot of us, maybe especially in our generation. But I know it changed everybody. But
Sure.
what were we fine with? What did we not miss? In particular, I took a really strong look at that and did not go back to some of those things that I
Yep.
didn't miss, whether it was being a part of this board or being engaged in that particular group of people or whatever it was. Those things did not bring me any happiness, and I knew it because I didn't miss them at all when I got clamped down. And did that happen to any of you?
Yes, most definitely. There
Yeah.
were things I thought I would die without. You know, my world was going to end. Daggone it. Didn't happen. And I came out happier on the other end because I got to know myself a little better through those experiences.
That to me, that's the main point right there, is that we've learned that we don't need certain physical things. We don't need that. Those moments that you're in the forest, those moments that you're not being told what to think by someone else, those moments are spiritual moments, I think, because those are the moments where you can question in your own mind, in the quiet, whether you believe in a divine being, creator, God, whatever it is that you think. You can sit there alone in your thoughts and try to reason it and think about it. Those are the best times, and I think that's why. And sometimes I'm expressing it in a deeper way, but I can go out and just enjoy the forest too. I can go out and just enjoy a beautiful work of art that Sue has done, or others, or music. Ultimately, when I think about it, I like to think about,
Are
why.
we teaching people that?
What? I'm
Are
sorry.
we teaching our kids that?
We should be. I have always. I don't think we are, because it goes back to what earlier on when you said, why are we not seeing it on TV, or why are we not seeing it here or there? It's because they're not built for it. They're not going to talk about achieving happiness because they're there to achieve revenue. Even whether it's ABC, CBS, NBC,
Yeah, it doesn't matter who. Yeah.
streaming service, whatever. They're all there to make money. Everyone, to some degree or another, has, and I'm not saying it's a bad word, okay, but everyone has an agenda of some sort, whether right, and in school systems, and you can see during COVID that a lot of the boards had agendas, and a lot of the parents started. One of the good things, people were home and they started to notice what their children were being taught, and they're like, not only no, but hell no. But that's good. That means that people are starting to get involved.
Be involved, yeah. To engage.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and
Jackie.
I would say, just tagging onto that real fast, I think that we all think we are teaching our children. We would hope we are teaching our children through our examples, through actual moments with them in nature, with how we treat people. I think that we think we're teaching them, but I think also, and I'm speaking for myself, I think a lot of us underestimated the influence of the outside world on these precious little minds that we thought we had full control of, and so they were going to be great human beings.
Until COVID, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that one thing that we haven't discussed that is important in happiness is forgiveness, right? Because we hold on to things that hurt us, that we experience trauma from people we love growing up, people around us that are imperfect people, that gratitude or that trauma, there are things that that fill our soul, I believe, and impact our body, right? Because you can have
It's the reason I stopped working full time for other people and went and opened my own business, because I physically recognized the impact that work environment was having on me. Didn't mean to interrupt, but yes.
Right. Because your soul can worry about something and cause your body to have ulcers. So
Mhm.
or back pain or anything else.
no, and there are going to be people listening to this that don't believe in the soul, but I could argue that and work on another show. But I do, and I think there are good reasons, because I think physical states and mental states are completely different things. But
what do you think, Glenn? Because we haven't heard from you in a bit. I'm going to let you in.
Sure. Two things. First, Mike, I have 3 kids. One of them, my youngest, John, he's 24, I think. He loves to go in the woods. I think at least once a week he goes out in the woods and sits and meditates for 2 hours all by himself. He loves being in nature. If he could buy a chunk of land and put a tent or a trailer on there, he'd be totally content. To Jackie, a little while ago, you're talking about it's easy to marry a rich man as it is to marry a poor man. In my experience, women who look at the money that a man has are usually looking for their comfort and their security. So they're going after security, and they see money as a way to provide security. So I'll always have a place to sleep. I'll always have a roof over my head. I'll have safety. I'll have clothing. I may have a place in society if but that's a security thing that women are after. And that's why as guys get richer, they get more attractive to women of
certain types, not
certain
all
types. Yeah. I don't want to categorize all women that way, because I know that most of the women that I know that are in my family are not that type, but there are that type.
Well, see, I know that my wife loved me just for my handsome, good looks.
Because you didn't have a dime to your
I didn't
name.
have a dime, right?
Same here.
Also, hey, since we're talking about, the forest a lot today, the question is, how far can you go into a forest?
All the way.
You can only go in halfway. Then you start coming out.
Wow.
That's the
Sue,
dad
please
joke of
take
the
it
day.
back over.
joke of the day.
Okay, so that's over. No, so my real question then is, all right, let's just assume for the sake of argument that the 4 of us have made some effort to discuss it in our family, in our homes, to look at what makes us happy instead of just chasing money. How do we move that outside of our homes? How do we move that into our communities? How do we make, and I'm not saying force anything, but how do we bring the topic in conversation? I go back to my conversation with economic development directors. I just keep saying, and why is our AAA bond rating important? Like, how many more farms are we going to turn into just in our local community? How many more farms are we going to turn into more houses that cost us more money to build more schools for blah, 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 blah. It's a never ending cycle. Why is chasing growth a priority? And how do we address that? That was an easy one.
Yeah, it's an easy question. I'm gonna jump in first. The old adage that if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward, I think is so pushed onto us as Americans. We, from the very beginning of our creation, we were pushing into the wilderness. We're pushing and pushing and pushing and rolling over the top of whatever was there, mowing it down and pushing whatever was there aside. The ills of our past will be dealt with one year, but we've always been an expansionist nation as Americans. But are we that way as human beings? Is that just a natural thing that we do as human beings, that we just want to push and push and push?
No, I don't think it is. I think that we're complex individuals, and when we are out there in the forest and we're thinking about it, we're more qualitative. We're thinking about those things that those things about love and mercy and generosity and faithfulness and all those things that you can't measure. And I think the focus is on the quantitative, because it's what we see. We think about the quantitative, the science, everything like that. And that's great. That's good. I think it's extremely useful. But when we say that's all there is, that's a problem, because to even make a philosophical statement to say that's all there is not a scientific statement. So we have to recognize we're complex people. There is more to us than just a measurement. And even if we take measurements, and people who fight against polls all the time will go, well, that's one poll. Who took the poll? Who asked the questions? Who shaped those questions? How did they tabulate it? What was their formula? They question every aspect of it. And I'm glad they do, because again, it rolls back to, we're looking for some framework of truth at a given moment, a snapshot of what's going on, so we can make better decisions. But when we're making those better decisions, we want to think about that social, that physical, that spiritual, and that environmental stuff. And it all goes together in my worldview.
I've been all over the world, and I have seen Americans appreciated for our generosity, for our friendliness, for our outgoing spirit, in many, many ways. From dropping candy bars in Berlin to, everything in between and before. So I don't think that we culturally are what we allow ourselves to be represented as. I think we are deeper, as you said, more complex, and we are more interested in those things, but we get caught up in this weird rat race. And for me, that's why COVID did not bother me so much, in that it forced me to stop and go, why am I doing that? What am I doing? I didn't even miss buying that. Or whatever, and the thing that gave me the most freedom of heart was, walking out in the woods, or digging, planting a garden, or getting in my convertible and just driving some road in a giant loop for an hour before I came back to the house and didn't go anywhere. Just drove around in a big circle, just to literally put the convertible top down and let the wind blow. But I don't know. I just feel like, do we think we could make our society and our culture better if we chose individually to prioritize and measure happiness?
I think the answer to that is yes, we could. Will we? I don't think so.
Well, I think that we should prioritize, like our Declaration of Independence says, pursuing happiness, right? Because happiness isn't a goal, I don't think. Happiness is a pursuit. Happiness, or maybe it is a goal and a pursuit, but it's not an end, a means to an end, or the end, that type of thing. So, yeah, just like this show is doing, we're calling some things into question. We're thinking about it and how we can pursue it better and what it means, so that we can be more holistic people, right? Well, so that we can, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the pursuit of happiness. I think, unfortunately, though, for many, probably I would hazard to say the majority of Americans, the pursuit of happiness takes us right back to the pursuit of more. If only we had more money, if only we had more of this or more of that, then we'd be happy. I don't know that the actual concept or meaning of the word happiness is understood. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does, but we're using it in two different ways. I think that, the pursuit in happiness, in the way our forefathers brought it up in the Constitution, was in relation to having inalienable rights, right? These are not rights that are subjective. These are objective rights.
Not imposed upon one.
That our forefathers believed, came forth from a divine being, right? So a lot of the early law and things were formed out of those. So we keep. Was that? Did the wolf just howl? What was that?
I think that's an awesome hound. I love it.
Oh, with its name being Wolf, I thought, never mind. That pursuit, I think, is important. But even right up front, we're told that all these certain things are inalienable, right? So that's something for people to ponder. If they are inalienable, why are they? And where does that come from? And I think that goes back to prudence and our individual ability to govern and discipline ourselves through the use of reason, right? That's what prudence is. So we can't convince everyone to believe what we believe, but we try to use evidence to believe what we do believe, right? Not everyone is persuaded by our evidence, and quite honestly, none of us has perfect evidence. So, but that's why it's a pursuit. So we continue after that to try to think about it, because I'll be honest, I think in the church, in the synagogues, in society in general, people's ability to logic and reason is about an inch deep. And I'm not saying mine is much deeper, right? Maybe an inch and a quarter. But in general, my experience, and that's where I'm speaking from, whenever I try to have a deeper conversation along these lines, I see people's eyes glaze over.
Well, I mean, that's certainly what happens when economic development directors hear me going on and on sometimes. I just happen to be in the room with some of them once in a while working on projects, and I become friends enough with them. But
are they happy?
Pardon?
Are they happy?
Well, I don't know that they're happy. That's a good question. I'll ask next time I talk to one. But I do know that they're comfortable doing their jobs, getting more to the community, right? That's their function, is to bring more to the community. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting dilemma to try to, I guess I go back to my point, looking for balance, right? In any community, if you're in a community meeting, if you're at the PTA, if you're at a basketball game, is there balance? Are we celebrating the good as much as we are the bad? I think we are at a basketball game. You know, like I really do. I think we celebrate the good shots and we boo the bad ones, and it's very linear, very right on the surface. Any sports stuff, we do pretty good at that. Can we translate that? You know, can we bring that balance into, I don't know, the school board meeting or whatever? I don't know. It's not looking good around here, but in general, I think we have this very narrow window of time post-COVID where a lot of people have reassessed. Telework worked for me. I'm not going to go back to driving into the office 6 days a week or 5 days a week. I'm going to telework at least 3. And if they don't like me, I'll go find someone who does. I mean, it's part of, they're changing their personal conditions and probably their personal economy to make a point, right? To make a decision. Glenn.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are some jobs you cannot telecommute for.
Sure.
I have a job you can't telecommute for. You have to be hands-on. My wife loves working from home. She's working from home right now. I don't think she's an introvert. She does not want to go back and be around people. She thrives on being able to just shut herself in her own little cave and, you know, pipe in on meetings. And Mike and I think we would wither and dry up on a vine if that had to be. COVID was hard on us extroverts. COVID was fabulous for the introverts of us.
But didn't it help you prioritize, Glenn, what was important? Didn't you not miss some things or decide to not go back to some things?
Yeah, it is interesting, especially in the particular job that I work in day to day. It is not an essential. It's not essential, and to realize that your whole economy at your house is because you're non-essential. I mean, I was an essential worker for my non-essential business, but so I worked through COVID, but we were not essential as our department. Our department was a non-essential. Salesforce of cars was not an essential part.
Jackie, you look like you wanted in. And
let me put the mic back on. I'm not just rehearsing. That was Carly, by the way, in the background, howling. So sorry. No, I wasn't wanting to jump in. I'm just listening to what everyone is saying, and I'm pretty much agreeing with everything that I hear. And happiness is so subjective. And for me anyway, it's not, I used to think it was wrapped up in things I had more, right? Get more of, get a better car, get a better house, get more jewelry. It shows that you've arrived kind of. No, it doesn't. And that's what
Well, is
COVID
that a
did.
function of age? I mean, I don't mean to,
No, it's true. It is a function of age.
Of a certain age where we've had a
Yeah.
lot and we've done what we don't need more, but
Yeah, but that's kind of what I'm driving at too. It is a function of age. Do y'all remember when your parents would say, youth is wasted on the young? Right? Now I kind of understand it. Ugh, unfortunately. But with that age, with that maturity comes that knowledge. So my question is, how do we get that message that more is not happy necessarily to the children that we raised or the ones that are being raised now?
Right.
How do we flip that narrative?
Yeah.
And I don't know that we can right now.
To follow up on what you said, Jackie, and you earlier, Sue, about how do we get out there? How do we do that? Yeah, that is the first place. I'm astonished sometimes. For instance, when we were in Europe, there were many times that I would be with people in one of the greatest medieval churches of all time, and I would be, or with some of the greatest religious paintings of forever in the Uffizi or other places, right? And people would not know. And I don't care if I do care, but whether you're religious or not, but it's a matter of just education and history for you not to know like what some of the stained glass means, what some of those paintings are, who's this big statue that Michelangelo carved down there in Florence? David? Never heard of him. Well, I'm sorry. Your school failed you. And, you should know. You should be teaching your children. I think you should be teaching your children some aspect of what you know. You should be trying to learn things. When we had to try to brush up on math, my wife is great at math. I'm not so hot. I did algebra 2 and didn't do so hot at it. But when we try to show our kids stuff, we'd pull out books and we'd study it and try to be able to show it to them. All right, they're going to have spiritual questions too. What are you going to do? Just throw them out on the street? Right? They're going to have all kind about the environment. Do you have opinions around our dinner table? Bethany, who comes on our show, sometimes my daughter would tell you around our dinner table, we talked about the environment. We talked about social. We talked about justice. We talked about spiritual. We talked about, everything that's coming up like we have before. We had a transgender episode of the Real Squabble that you can find on our YouTube channel, right? We're going to talk with Glenn's wife and our team again in the future, hopefully by the fall, on reparations again. We're doing that here. We're trying to be an influencer. We influence our children. We do it through social media. And I know you guys are probably like me. You get involved in local civics groups, your church, your synagogue, things that are going on in your own neighborhood. And you influence people first and foremost through relationships. And people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You've heard that, right? And that's really true. A lot of times we try to be salespeople of some worldview we have before we even show a heart.
Or learn about that area. It's one of the things I get most from, and I have strongly encouraged everyone else that I know in every environment to go to some other culture. I don't care if it's just another state, right? Go to some other culture and appreciate what's happening there, because it gives you that perspective, which we've mentioned a number of times. When you are outside of your bubble, And you can, and I don't even, you can do it in your neighborhood. You can help with the homeless shelter and get in a completely different culture than you are in at the moment, perhaps. So I guess I just wanted to say that I think that it's worth looking at, as we start to kind of wrap up, that it's worth looking at how you're measuring happiness, and is it at least balanced against your economic measures? And can you find a way to encourage others to do the same? And that's what I leave with you.
Okay, that's great. Any last words, Jackie?
Well, I think we have a couple of thoughts about, maybe last words about happiness, and then we have a couple thoughts to go from there.
Okay.
No problem. I think I just want to
Happy?
leave this with I'll leave this with everybody. I think that the first step to exploring a greater sense of happiness is to actually think about what makes you happy.
You happy, yeah.
What makes you happy? What makes your soul just open up and go, wow, So that's what I would leave.
Glenn, are you happy?
Actually, I'm a very happy person. Yeah. I know you know Johanna, right? I've been happily married to her for almost 31 years now.
Oh, wow.
Good for you. Congrats.
And,
Yeah.
I would say that companionship with somebody that truly gets you and really gets you is probably the key to my happiness.
Good. Hey, Sue, before you jump into that, my final thought would be that money does not bring you happiness, but it would certainly help you try to find it in a better neighborhood.
Well, with that said, I think Glenn gets the last word. He's got something that's just not quite a heavy topic for us. What do you got, Tiff? What do you got for us?
Well, we were chatting before about the Queen. I missed the whole Queen thing with Paddington, so I wanted you to tell me that story, because I came in, and when I joined the crew late.
You need to go to YouTube, and you need to just Google the Queen in Paddington, and it will come up. But it was the opening to the Party at the Palace concert on Saturday night. She surprised everyone with her tea party with Paddington Bear in a big video on all the giant screens, all up and down the Mall, and in front of Buckingham Palace and the Victoria statue.
And she just happened to have a jam sandwich.
It was just darling, but it does show you how you can find happiness even if you have the weight of the world like the Queen does on your shoulder. You can find some way to bring joy.
Usually after watching Downton Abbey or the Jubilee, I find happiness in walking around the house and saying jam sandwich.
With cutting the crust off of it. So I came in when you guys were talking about the Queen and tea, and I'm like, oh, hey, my wife and I, we were just in Victoria. We were at the Empress Hotel, and we did high tea. And during high tea, the waiter, he's asking us what kind of tea do we want, and he's saying, okay, this is the tea that Princess Di likes when she's with us, and this is the one the Queen likes, and that's the one that that had almost been their only exclusive tea for years and years and years, but that's the one she still likes. And I'm like, I don't know anything about tea. But I do know I work with one of my best friend, Richards. He's from the outside of London, and I work with him, known him for 30 years. And I'm like, okay, so if you ever want to have a fun chat with an Englishman, ask them, do you put the milk in first or do you put the tea in first? I can still ask Richard the same question. I've asked him that several times, and he'll give me a 15-minute dissertation on, well, it depends. And then it goes on from there. And I think
the folks at the Victoria told you the Queen likes it how?
Well, yeah. So he said that the Queen puts the milk in her cup first and then puts the tea in. And I said, well, then that's how I'll have it.
There you go.
Wow. Very educational show we have here.
Yes.
If you're in Boston Harbor, the tea goes in first.
Right.
Clearly.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, guys. It's great seeing you today and talking to you. We will have on July 5th, we will have a guest, Dr. Douglas Grutais. He will talk to us about Marxism, neo-Marxism, Gramsci, the long march through the institutions, and perhaps some of its influence, negative and or positive, in critical theory, not necessarily critical race theory, but in critical theory. So we hope everyone will join us on the 5th of July at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That will be posted on our YouTube channel, The Real Squabble. That concludes the show. Tell us what you think about The Real Squabble. Suggest topics. Post your comments as we're recording. And remember to like us on Facebook and subscribe to YouTube. We'll see you next time on The Real Squabble.